Let's analyze what has happened so far and perhaps what we can expect in the Indian markets going ahead, looking at the gloom that we are seeing elsewhere in the world. Craig Erlam is joining us to help us do this, Senior Market Analyst at OANDA, along with Nikhil Kamath. He's co-founder at Zerodha and True Beacon. Great to have you both with us, gentlemen. Nikhil, coming to you first, the question is that despite these rising interest rates everywhere, and that includes India, a deteriorating global economy that has sunk so many Western indices this year itself in 2022, the Nifty and the Sensex seem to be in a world of their own and they keep rising. Is it the strength of the domestic economy? What are the reasons, in your understanding?
Well, Vikram, on a relative footing, there is a certain degree of optimism about India. If you ask investors across the world today, while they're critical about their own ecosystem, I think a lot of them feel they could enter the India story even at current multiples. This could be due to many reasons, notwithstanding all the trouble our neighbors in the region are having. We've had constant government and policy action for a significant amount of time, wherein we've had one incumbent government. All of this plays in favorably for India, and we see a lot of appetite from foreign investors who are coming in at the moment today.
Greg, do you agree with this point of view? Because that sense of stability is something that the markets generally applaud. And in this time of so much uncertainty elsewhere, does India really present that sense of bearing that is a story that could last for the long term? Because investors are looking for such spaces, aren't they?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I think there's a couple of things that kind of feed into that as well. I mean, by maintaining this kind of position of neutrality in a world where there is such deep division, when you look at, for example, between the US and China, and obviously with the Western world and Russia right now, I think that to a large extent has benefited India and therefore its economy. And I think the other thing that really benefits it is what's happening in China. The fact that we are seeing much lower levels of growth. We have seen more hostility towards China, for example, towards Chinese tech and towards the Chinese economy as a whole, more barriers being put up. And this creates opportunity for India. And I think people are looking at India right now, looking at the challenges facing China in particular, and seeing that as an opportunity for many Chinese firms, for many Indian firms, going forward. So I think this is a beneficial component as well.
To take on this Chinese question about the pain within the Chinese economy, which is, of course, connected very deeply with its political crisis in the wake of its zero-COVID policy, and you're seeing the unrest over there. Will this benefit investment flows into India? How much have you seen that happen already, and how much more do you think could follow in its wake, like Craig is pointing out?
Well, definitely benefiting us. We have to be cognizant to the fact that from an infra and manufacturing perspective, we are not on par with China yet. I mean, we're moving in the right direction, and I hope someday soon India will be equally competitive. But China, as things stand, are still, far larger, and they have more efficiency than as an ecosystem which is focused towards that. I think the benefits will increase, considering what might or might not happen in China tomorrow will probably exaggerate that trend in one direction or another. But we are definitely benefiting from it. Just recently I was listening to someone say Foxconn is setting up a plant in Karnataka, and they're going to employ 70,000 people, and even larger companies from the West want to protect their supply chain. So we will benefit, but to truly take benefit of what China might be going through right now, I think significant work needs to be done to bring up our infra, shore up infra, and improve manufacturing to the point where we're in par with China in many contexts.
Sure. So, I mean, we would see many parts of the components within the equity markets, within the Indian equity markets, perhaps rise, whether that happens all at one go, because we've seen that growth, credit growth as well, which is pushing up the bank Nifty too, and I'll come to that in a moment. But Craig, the world's inflationary concerns and the consequent recessionary fears, and this in the midst of the energy crisis, all of that means that there will be little room other than continuous interest rate hikes how much will the Fed's moves, according to you, have a bearing on how Indian equities will behave compared to other emerging markets, especially in the Asia-Pacific region?
Well, I think we're now nearing the point when we're coming to an end of the rate hike cycle from the Federal Reserve, and I think that will relieve some of the pressure on other countries around the world, and that includes India, because, I mean, of course, when we look at how the currency movements have been in the US dollar, that pressure has been intensifying now over the course of this year. And when you are an importer, for example, of such large amounts of energy, then the value of the dollar plays a massive role within that. And anything which ultimately creates difficult situations for the US economy, again, continued intensification of interest rate hikes, is going to be felt around the world. There's that old saying that when the US sneezes, the world catches a cold. So everyone has been watching the situation unfold in the US and hoping that they can manage that soft landing that the Fed was so confident that could be achieved. And it seems like we're now, like say, nearing the point of the end of that rate tightening cycle. I think we'll see 50 basis points in December and maybe even just one more 25 basis points after that, after which we'll see where things start to stabilize, hopefully start to see inflationary pressures subsiding around the world, with the impact of base effects being flattering on the data in 2023, but also other things contributing to more downside pressures. And I think that will ultimately benefit India and Indian stocks.
Nikhil, do you agree with that point of view? Because, yes, as far as the rise right now is concerned, it's happening regardless of what we're seeing in the American economy, what we're seeing in UK, for example, across Europe, with whatever the Fed does next. What the bank Nifty has done, it's really been one of the indices that has taken it up quite a lot. Do you see other verticals also join in? Do you think this party is going to last?
Well, I guess if I were to be speaking to a retail investor, it's important to remember that where we're sitting today as a market, we're in a fairly expensive spot. While most of the world has corrected significantly, we're at all-time highs today. Earnings don't seem to have kept pace with valuations, at least in the short term. And I think we need to remind ourselves of that. We need to kind of like know that we have done well, but we are expensive today. And like you were saying rightly earlier, I feel like the world is a more interconnected ecosystem today than it has been at any time in its past. And a recession in the West, especially in Europe and America, will have significant troubles that it might bring upon the Indian shores as well, and we will be affected in a negative manner. So I think we're in an expensive spot. I don't think now is the time to recommend and cajole people onto buying more equity and being very one-sided about it. I think maybe the time is right today to diversify. Sure. On a relative basis. If I were to say something, I think the Nasdaq is actually fairly cheap compared to many companies that are available both on the private and the public side today. So one really has to go through all the options that they have at hand and figure out what might make more sense.
Well, talking about valuations, a lot of experts have been talking about how stretched they seem right now. But how much further is this upper trajectory that the Indian markets have been on continue to lead the way? That's something we are watching very closely, and we'll keep reconnecting with you both. Craig and Nikhil, thanks very much for joining us with your perspective on India Tonight.